It's time now for County-Wide, a presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. You'll hear about the interesting issues and happenings that affect all our lives. Here's today's County-Wide.
Well, a good day to you and welcome to the program. Again, it is County-Wide. I'm Brad Miller, welcoming again a guest who has visited with us a number of times. From Accord Hospice and Palliative Care, Dierdra Kearney is the CEO. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Did I say your last name correctly?
You did.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try. Autumn Nadolny is a guest today, two folks from Accord. And Autumn, what is your role at Accord?
I am a medical social worker.
Okay. Okay. That sounds important to some of the things we're going to talk about. Now, this will be a two-part program, as we've done a number of times, Dierdra. There's so much to talk about. When we say hospice, a lot of people are going to do, I think, the first thing I thought. And I want to just kind of bounce back to that very quickly. We've touched on it before. It seems to me that a lot of people are going to assume one thing about hospice. And I have found through talking with you and some of the programs that you offer that it is so much more than that. And today, we're going to talk about hospice can be a valuable, invaluable tool for children.
Absolutely.
For young people. Tell me just in a nutshell, and then we'll explore some.
Well, I love that you brought that up, Brad. It is a myth about hospice that it is meant for just a patient. Some believe it's, just a few days or a few weeks. And as we've talked about before, there is really no time limit for a hospice patient. But one of the beautiful things about hospice is the support to families, which includes children and grandchildren. And we are thrilled to talk about some of those services today.
Yeah. When we say hospice, again, like you just kind of indicated, a lot of times we think that means near the end for a patient. Very often that's what it is. But your focus in so many different directions, including what we'll talk about today with kids, is when that grandparent has passed, or the parent, or a sibling, or whomever it may be, but not only passed away, has been deployed in the military, has simply moved.
Absolutely.
All of these things, and you don't think about it. You guys have thought about it, and have a number of different kinds of programs that we'll do. When you said something before we opened the mics, I'd like you to share. I'm not going to say it. If a child is old enough to love.
Yeah, this just a beautiful concept. If a child is old enough to love, they are old enough to grieve. And when we think about what grief means and what can trigger grief, of course, death kind of rises to the top of that list. But the same kinds of feelings of loss and fear and uncertainty can exist simply by a person no longer being in the child's life or in their proximity. Sure. And obviously, we have a number of kind of experiences that children have where they can lose a loved one or have a loved one not be in their life.
Yeah.
Obviously distance, obviously death, but divorce, sometimes addiction,
right.
Deployment, incarceration,
any situation,
estrangement, any situation
where someone is there as a constant and is gone, and the younger the child, I suppose, the very youngest, it may not be a bigger thing, but there's going to be a huge path from 2 to, I don't know the age.
Right.
Kids are different.
Statistics kind of show that the younger the child is, the more difficult it is for them to process that.
Makes sense.
Partly because they may not have the language, partly because they may not, be able to express. But there are ways that we can see it as adults in their lives. And one of the things we have really aimed to do is to focus our bereavement services, which are part of our hospice menu of services already, but we have taken some resources and expertise and focused specifically on children.
Yeah. You mentioned a statistic about COVID, which I still think we are years away from even getting the full impact of what that did.
I don't think we understand, but there are some numbers coming out.
Right.
Pre-COVID, the statistics around children in the United States, 0 to 18, who had lost a parent was somewhere around 7%. In a post-COVID world, those numbers, the best they can tell, look more like 12%. It increases from there if you include the age range 0 to 25, which, some of those kids who were teenagers, high school, just out of high school are approaching that now.
Right.
And even higher if you include grandparents as primary caregivers. And we have a lot of that in the country as well.
Yeah. And okay. Autumn, you're here to talk primarily about youngsters. Do you work primarily with young people or?
So primarily with hospice, I would say a lot of it is older adults, but we often do see children, whether it's like from grandchildren that come in or, that grandparent was taking care of that child.
Right.
So we do see children in the hospice world
And
that are impacted.
I wouldn't even know where to kind of begin. It's going to depend, I guess, on what other family survivors are there that would be familiar to the child.
Correct.
If grandma's gone and grandpa's still there, that there may be that kind of a connection. But how do you eat? What is there? What an intake and an assessment? How do you even start?
I'll let Autumn speak to this, but I do want to say she's an amazing medical social worker. And when we hear that term, it's a little bit misleading because we think it has to do with just clinical, but really her role in hospice, as other social workers in hospice do, is to be a support for that family, whatever that looks like. So whatever those goals are, we're going to wrap services around, help to evaluate what the needs are, and sometimes the questions that are going to come up are still a surprise to families. It really is just this journey that they've never been on, and Autumn does a great job of beginning wherever they are. So I'll let you address that.
Yeah, I will say anytime I go into a family's home, we're assessing how they're doing, who's involved in that person's care, who may be impacted, and how we can support them. And one thing that we all try to do is when we go into that person's home, we're meeting them where they're at. So sometimes that family, they may have children involved and they have experience with grief and loss, so they feel comfortable, introducing what's happening to the children. Sometimes they're not comfortable and they don't know where to begin because that's their first experience with it. So, we're meeting them where they're at while providing, some education about what's happening, maybe some tips on how to address it with the kids, that if they're resistant or hesitant about, letting the children say goodbye or asking how they're doing, we're just trying to, ask like, where's that thought process happening? How can we maybe still address it with the kids and bring them into a way that they're also going to understand?
Right.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times, and I'm sure this is the wrong way to do it, for a lot of kids, a lost pet will be their first kind of brush. And sometimes that can be very valuable. It's sad, but it can be valuable. Do you find that if that has been the case when you start to work with a child who, say, has lost a grandparent, just for our context, if they've lost a pet, can you use that, or is that a terrible idea?
No, I think that's a great idea, provided that the loss of that pet was also handled with honesty.
There you go.
So it's very simple. I think we get really worried, and we maybe anticipate that kids don't have the ability to accept and understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to consider where a child is developmentally. But one of the very first keys to success here is to be honest with children. So avoid using things like, we've lost your grandma, or grandma has passed away. Children don't understand what that means. So I would say if there was good discussion around, our pet is no longer with us, he was sick or he got hurt.
Right.
And whatever your value system is, it may be that it's been explained that now your pet is in heaven or in a giant ranch somewhere.
Right.
So having honest discussions with children about whoever it is they've lost is important. Avoiding euphemisms. And it's easy to do because we want to soften it, but really we're bringing more questions. So we want to be clear with kids and find language that they understand what that means. And I think too, just allowing kids to ask questions and then answer those questions. And answer them honestly. Right. Sometimes we give kids so much information that they really aren't able to process that, or they don't know what those words mean. So I think that's a great introduction if that certainly has happened. I also think that children may be aware peripherally of people that that may have died already. Extended family members or grandparents.
Right.
And yes, you can draw on those experiences when you're talking about a very close family member. But it's important that we're using the right words. So if someone has died, we say that. If someone is just gone because of distance, we say that. And then we also want to make sure that we are explaining things as children ask the question, well, is that am I going to die? And
my next question was going to be, what do you do when that happens?
Is what grandma had contagious? So we want to give them the
Right.
facts, reassuring them that it's a part of life, that it happens, and no, you're not in any kind of danger right now.
That's
and
gonna
mommy's
happen.
not going anywhere, or grandpa's fine. And so just really being as candid as you can, using the simplest of language.
I want to add too that I think what at least I often see is that, families want to protect the children.
Yep.
So oftentimes it's like, we're not going to address this because, this is a very difficult thing. And I think that there's a misconception of believing that the children just won't understand. But the honesty is so important, because if we're not addressing it, they're still feeling that loss. They're still questioning what's happening. So addressing it, I think, actually helps them find closure and understand a little bit better. And we're addressing how they're feeling instead of just ignoring it.
Important information. We're talking with experts on this. This is a delicate subject. All of these kinds of conversations are, but that's why they're important to talk about, because sometimes we don't. These are difficult, or can be, and the more information and knowledge that you have, perhaps the easier it will be when these times visit your family. Dierdra Kearney is with Accord Hospice, the CEO. Autumn Nadolny is a medical social worker there. We're going to talk more about this. Kids and, death or loss or grief. How do we deal with it? How do we guide them through it as we're trying to heal ourselves? It's Countywide. We'll be back right after this.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley, and your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology, factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Thank you so very much for your generosity and kindness in helping others. I hope that you take advantage of the many Arizona state tax credits available when giving to qualified charities and schools. If you haven't taken advantage, I hope you'll ask your favorite charity if they qualify. You can go to Arizona Department of Revenue website, search for tax credits, and look at the list of qualifying charities. Then look at your latest Arizona income tax return and see how an Arizona tax credit can benefit many. This is Lewis saying thanks again.
Let's talk. That's the message from Jonna Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, providing a personal touch when making insurance and financial decisions. Jonna will simplify your insurance needs while offering competitive pricing. Let's talk auto, home, life, and farm. Call Jonna at Farm Bureau today at 928-649-8686. Your Cottonwood Farm Bureau property and casualty insurance company. At Farm Bureau, they insure more than just farms.
We welcome you back to the program. It is Countywide. Dierdra Kearney is our guest, Autumn Nadolny, and they're with Hospice, Accord Hospice and Palliative Care. And we're talking about children and how grief impacts children. And perhaps, many of us carry loss throughout our lives, and that's natural. How we deal with it up front may be a huge determinant of how we deal with it and process it for the rest of our lives. One thing you mentioned, Dierdra, during the commercial break is that there's going to be school performance issues, perhaps friendship losses, because a child is grieving and doesn't have the proper tools and outlets.
Absolutely. I think we like to advise and suggest that we keep, as many of the same routines, that the child's life still has structure, that we're giving them some stability and certainty in a really uncertain time. But one of those things, obviously, is school attendance, and it is incredibly difficult for children to move throughout their day in a normal way with this giant loss that they've just had. Classroom size, teacher abilities and
Right.
experience in grief and loss really have an impact, obviously. we expect to see some performance issues. It could be based on attendance, just days when it's just too hard and they're not ready to go back to school and kind of face what that all means. Some of it is distraction. Some of it is just not understanding what's happening and how they are feeling. And that obviously can impact productivity.
Do you think, I don't know if there's any way to gauge this or any stats available, probably not, but do you think that families are good with sharing with educators when their child,
I'm assuming
a teacher would want to know that.
I'm assuming some of the stats that I've seen is from 2021 on that I think it is 8 out of 10 teachers reported at least one student in their class that experienced loss during the school year.
Okay.
So I think, I don't know if they are aware of every student who may have experienced a loss and how immediate in the family that loss was. But I definitely think it's a more widespread problem and teachers are having to, deal with kind of the ramifications of that in their classrooms.
Yeah. I kind of painted an example of kind of going the other way. And maybe this is, I hope it's kind of an antiquated model. Times were different 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago about just really not telling the child much of anything at all.
I don't remember if we've shared this in any of our other discussions, Brad, but 10 years ago, we had an instance in hospice that kind of opened our eyes. And you're right. It was the generation of children being seen and not heard and, kind of having roles in the family. But perhaps we didn't understand that they were observing everything, whether we told them or not.
No matter what, whether it's around this issue or anything else.
Exactly.
The eyes and ears are open.
We had a situation where it was grandparents raising their grandchildren, twin boys. They were 11 at the time, and their grandmother was on hospice and terminally ill. And we had worked with this family for several months, knowing that this was going to be an area of concern for us, and we wanted the boys to have as much support as possible.
Sure.
We endeavored to have support and offered to be available as things kind of got closer and she became more sick. And the week that she was passing away, our social workers were hopeful that this would be the time that we'd be able to sit down and kind of provide some support as the grandfather and grandmother shared what was happening. And it just didn't happen. We just the day before, we were kind of moved her bed into the living room. So now there's a big hospital bed in the living room.
Right.
And as it so happened, I was there on that day that she passed. It was that evening, but the boys came home from school, and in my mind, the social worker and I thought, okay, things really have declined to a period now where there's no getting around. We got to have this discussion. And as the boys came through the door after school, there was visible kind of concern on their faces because the bed is now in the living room.
Something's going on.
Yep, grandma's in the living room sleeping. And as they walked through the door, one of them said, "Is Grandma okay?" And I thought, this is it. We can sit down with the boys and help Grandpa tell him. And he said, "She's fine. Go do your homework."
Oh, boy.
And
where do you think that came from?
I think
fear?
It's that what we just talked about. I think it is, yes, a fear or a misunderstanding that children are not able to cope with the truth. And we know, of course, that isn't the case. That they.
But you're just kind of kicking the can down the road. It's a terrible analogy, but you're not. It's going to have to be addressed.
I think that there are just concerns around how do I find the words.
Yeah.
And I think in that case, there also was some real grief and loss happening with Grandpa.
Well, I was going to say, he's processing.
He was processing and really trying to understand, how do I say this?
Yeah.
And
you can't fault him.
Absolutely not. We're all humans doing the best we can.
Yeah.
But I think that, we worry, what if I break down? I don't want to scare them. I don't want them to think that things aren't going to be okay. They're going to be okay. But we really do have to begin somewhere. The grieving process begins somewhere. And the earlier the earlier we include children in that process, the healthier they're going to be. Ideally, 4 months before they would have known and been making memories with grandma those last 4 months. And that's not to say that they weren't making memories, but, really understanding what the circle of life looks like, and that death is normal, and that grieving is normal, and then helping kids kind of maneuver those feelings.
There's so many factors that are going to play into all of this. What is the nature of grandma's illness? Is she in pain or discomfort, or can she participate in the kids' lives, and to what degree? Just on and on. They're twin boys. They could be as different as night and day, and probably are. They're going to be, there's just so many different things that there is no template, there's no guidebook. But what you folks do seems to me to come awfully close to providing a template or a guidebook, because of your extensive experience in dealing with these situations and many, many more like them, and maybe never more importantly than with kids.
Well, we appreciate that, Brad. And I think, as Autumn mentioned, meeting families where they are, really asking those questions, being able as an outsider to look at the dynamics of this family, look at a prognosis, look at kind of the symptom management that we are doing to identify where is the best way that we can identify tools for coping. How do we speak to family members about talking with their children, and what do we think the future is going to look like? An easy and kind of simple first question is often, how much time do we have?
You bet. Yeah.
And that helps us to kind of shape what this might look like. But I also want to mention that our services extend beyond the loved one passing. Typically, it's around a year, a little over a year, but we certainly don't turn anyone away.
Yeah.
And if it takes us a couple of years of working with a family after their loved one has passed, then certainly we're there to do that.
Well, for our listeners' benefit, as we kind of wrap up here, how do I get a hold of you? Is there a phone, a website? What's the best way to do that?
Absolutely. So we do have a website, just www.accord Health Group. We also have offices in the Verde Valley, and our phone number is 928-278-4134. Okay.
I appreciate you coming in and talking about these things. Again, they can be difficult. It's heady conversation, but it's important for all of us to kind of be prepared for something that is going to come down the road for all of us, just as human beings on the earth. Our guest today from Accord Hospice, Dierdra Kearney, Autumn Nadolny. I'm Brad Miller. It's Countywide. We'll see you next time.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley, and your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology, factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Thank you so very much for your generosity and kindness in helping others. I hope that you take advantage of the many Arizona state tax credits available when giving to qualified charities and schools. If you haven't taken advantage, I hope you'll ask your favorite charity if they qualify. You can go to Arizona Department of Revenue website, search for tax credits, and look at the list of qualifying charities. Then look at your latest Arizona income tax return and see how an Arizona tax credit can benefit many. This is Lewis saying thanks again.
Let's talk. That's the message from Jonna Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, providing a personal touch when making insurance and financial decisions. Jonna will simplify your insurance needs while offering competitive pricing. Let's talk auto, home, life, and farm. Call Jonna at Farm Bureau today at 928-649-8686. Your Cottonwood Farm Bureau property and casualty insurance company. At Farm Bureau, they insure more than just farms.
This has been Countywide. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday at this time. If you have a topic or guest idea that you'd like to suggest, email us, news@myradioplace.com.